according to Padma-Priya 2015, a teaching or learning module should present a set or define a set of learning situations, include tests designed to guide the learner or teacher and provide them with feedback, have its own carefully specified function and be directed at clearly defined objectives, and be capable of fitting into a variety of learning paths, methods, and situations. Okay, so these are the characteristics of a self-learning module, very much the same as to how you defined what a good module is. So a self-learning module or a module can either be comprehensive or simple. So when you say comprehensive, everything is there, from the objectives to the activities to the content to the assessments. That's a comprehensive module. If we're looking at a simple module, it's more of a learning guide wherein it gives them a list of what they can do, what they can search, what topics they would have to read, or where will they read this. So that's more of the simple or the framework module. So it's a learning guide with everything else that they need. While the comprehensive, actually what we're using or what we're creating in DepEd is a comprehensive module. That being said, DepEd makes use of this instructional design. This is in the DepEd Order Number 1 Series of 2021 regarding the evaluation of self-learning modules. So a self-learning module is anchored on the curriculum with the MELCs, or the most essential learning competencies, the theoretical principles, and pedagogical principles. This has to be present in the whole self-learning module, which would have the elements of an overview, a presentation, an application, a generalization, and post-assessment. Now, if this module has been well made, then we'll have a product that is MELC-aligned, that would be developmentally appropriate, that is comprehensive, and that is self-directed. Then if we are able to achieve this kind of product or this kind of module, we will have independent learners who are able to continue learning and would have improved learner performance. So this is the instructional design that is being followed by the DepEd modules. Okay. Okay, so now we move on to the different elements per lesson. So as I go through the different elements, we'll also talk about bits and pieces in between. Okay, so we'll start with the overview. So the overview contains the introduction that discusses the topics of the module and the learning objectives. So the objectives has to be anchored on the MELCs, and then it should inform the learners of the expected outcomes. Now, what are MELCs? Okay, so our MELCs are those that is not just a response to addressing DepEd's not just the response of addressing the challenges of the current pandemic, but it was also actually done in response to the SDG 4, to develop resilient education systems. So actually, DepEd has been doing or has been reviewing the K-12 competencies even before the pandemic started. It just so happened that when the pandemic struck, this has been fast-tracked so that we'll have the most essential learning competencies. At kaya ito po yung ating K-12 MELCs. Originally, they were aiming to identify essential learning competencies, but with the pandemic, it has further been streamlined to become most essential learning competencies. So the review of the K-12 curriculum is stipulated on RA 1053-33, wherein they would be mapping the essential and desirable learning competencies within the curriculum. So the original K-12 curriculum, it will be streamlined to become essential learning competencies, okay? So that the aim is to identify the prerequisite knowledge and skills needed to prepare students for essential learning competencies, and then to analyze the interconnectedness of the prerequisite knowledge and skills among the learning competencies for each subject area. So again, DepEd has already started with the streamlining of the existing K-12 curriculum. Okay. So again, MELCs is, so because of that ongoing review and then the pandemic happened, Thus, the most essential learning competencies has been released. This is to enable teachers to focus instruction to the most essential and indispensable competencies of our learners that our learners must acquire. So in the DepEd infographic, it's the competencies that the students need so that they'll be able to continue their education and move on to the next level and then still achieve or be successful in life with the help of kalidad na edukasyon, ang sabi sa DepEd. So paano ba nasabi? How can you say that a learning competency is essential? So we have these 5 characteristics of what or how you can define or how you can describe an essential learning competency. Okay? First is it has to be aligned with the national or local standards and frameworks. Okay? It connects the content to higher concepts across content areas. It is applicable to real-life situations. If students leave school, it would still be important for them to have this competency above many others. And then it would not be expected for most students to learn this in settings other than formal education. So meaning, if the existing competencies that we have in the K-12 curriculum satisfies this 5, then it gets retained. If not, it gets either recasted or merged with the other competency, or it gets deleted. It gets removed. Yun po yung, so this is the things that they considered. Paano nila na-come up yung ating MELCs. Okay, so just like for the second part, it connects to connects the content to higher concepts across content areas. So the end product is the competency becomes a bit broader than what we usually have in the previous K-12 competencies. Diba? Kung medyo specific yung dati natin, when it came to the MELCs, it has become a little bit broader so that it will encompass a lot more competencies and it will be much more applicable to the real-life situations. Another quality or another characteristic that has to be achieved by a competency is that it has endurance, or it has to be an enduring competency. When you say endurance, it's the competence. These competencies are considered to have endurance, or it is considered enduring if it remains with the learners even after the test. Okay? Siguro na-experience natin to as a student na there were times na dahil sa sobrang dami ng ginagawa natin, nung estudyante tayo, parang we study only during the test. And then after the test, parang kumalma ka, na-relieve ka, and then nakalimutan mo na lahat ng pinag-aralan mo. So that is the problem. Okay? That is something that we do not want to happen. So the competency has to be enduring. Dapat after pagdaanan siya ng estudyante or after siyang pag-aralan ng estudyante, they'd be able to retain the competency, not just because they want to just pass the exam, but because they really learned. They really learned that particular competency. Okay? So examples of such competencies are the skills. So research skills, reading comprehension, writing, map reading, hypothesis testing, and other essential skills that are needed in our profession and in our everyday life. So yun na ngayon nagiging focus ng MELCs. Those enduring competencies that would also teach the students the skills needed to survive everyday life. Okay. So, how did they decide? A learning competency is retained if it satisfies the endurance criterion, which greatly contributes to lifelong learning and is a prerequisite skill to the next grade level. So, yun yung qualification niya. And then, it can be merged or clustered into one comprehensive learning competency if they have the same objective or learning intention. The reasons for dropping or removing a competency is if they are too specific and the articulation is similar to that of a learning objective, They are deemed appropriate to be introduced in an earlier quarter or grade level. They are recurring and they are subsumed in another learning competency. So take note of the first one. If they are too specific, they have to be, they'll get removed, okay? Kasi now the MELCs would have to be a bit broader, a bit more encompassing, because that's what we want our students to gain after going through a grade level. Okay. So the competencies, the most essential learning competencies are the competencies, again, that we want our students to have or to gain after going through that particular grade level. Kaya medyo mas encompassing dapat ang ating competencies. That is why they removed those that look similar to a learning objective. Okay. So you see the difference na when they talk about competencies, this has to be broad. When they talk about objectives, this needs to be very specific. Prompt niyo po ako if I'm being too fast. Okay. So this is an example taken from the MELCS guidelines on the topic of matter. So with different key stages and how they decided which will be retained, which will be deleted, and which will be justified, and the justification for it. So key stage 1, this is for science 3, as indicated by the code. Classify objects and materials of solid, liquid, and gas based on some observable characteristics. So this is the retained learning competency. Ano yung dinelete? Describe different objects based on their characteristics. Why did they delete? Because this particular competency can be subsumed in this retained competency. Meaning, if they are able to classify the objects as solid, liquid, and gas, they along with it, they can also present the observable characteristics such as shape, weight, and volume. Okay? So, parang under na siya. So it's more of a recurring thing. Okay? For this deleted learning competency. For key stage 2, this is science grade 5. Design a product out of local, recyclable, solid and or liquid materials in making useful products. And then the deleted learning competency is recognize the importance of recycle, reduce, reuse, recover, and repair in waste management. So what was removed was the lower level of the competencies, and what was retained is the higher level competency, wherein it is a given that if they can create or if they can design the product, then they should be able to recognize. So mas encompassing itong design a product in comparison to just recognizing. So they remove the recognizing, kaya ang retain na lang ay ang designing of the product. So, ayan, as stated in the justification. For key stage 3, this is grade 8. Use the periodic table to predict the chemical behavior of an element. The deleted learning competency is trace the development of the periodic table from observations based on similarities in properties of elements. Okay. So, between the two, the needed competency is the using of the periodic table to predict. Okay. Instead of just tracing the development. So parang on leveling, mas mababa ang na-delete na learning competency na pwede din naman siyang isubsume ng higher or ng retained na competency. It's like, it's a good to know thing. Parang ganun yung part of the idea. Okay. So, again, in justification, not as essential as the retained learning competency. It is essential kasi we are streamlining the competencies more. Therefore, in terms of leveling, kailangan yung mas mataas yung i-retain natin. Okay. And then last one, key stage 4. This is for grade 11 or 12, physical science. Describe the general types of intermolecular forces, and then the deleted learning competency was give the type of intermolecular forces in the properties of substances. Again, the deleted learning competencies can be tackled within or can be subsumed within the retained learning competency. So parang hindi masyadong madami ang lumalabas dun sa ating MELCs. The retained learning competencies has become broader.